This is Jacqueline White of the Fannin County Historical Commission. Today is October 14th, 2009, and I'm going to be talking to Mr. David McClure.
I'd like to start this interview telling you that this is David McClure, and we live here in Bonham, but we grew up out in West Texas, around La Mesa, east of La Mesa. My dad would always tell us, he grew up out here around Nunley, and his comment about living in East Texas around the Bonham area was that it was just like this 2009 October. It has rained and rained and rained, and they would have their cotton or corn crops in and ready to harvest, and it would start to rain and ruin their crops, or the bugs would eat them up. And he said he always told us that he intended to go someplace that it didn't rain quite so much, and he said, I went a little bit too far. But around the year in the late 30s, the McClure family had a thrashing machine and a GI case. I believe it was a 35 horsepower steam tractor. And they would go down to from the Nunley community down through Ravenna and Mulberry and thrash the grain. There was a big crew that went along with them, and so it was a lot of entertainment for folks watching this thing. And as they had been down into the Mulberry Bottom thrashing, and if you remember, about 20 years ago they paved this hill going off into the bottom, paved the road going off into the bottom. And before that it was just a big old sandy hill there, that old Red River sand. And when they would come up there with their steam tractor pulling the thrasher, the thing would start to jump, just like any vehicle does when you get in sand. Steel wheels, all of it steel wheels. And the Halls all lived right there along the edge of in the Mulberry area. My granddad would operate the steam tractor, and he would come up to the hill there, and it would start to jump. Well, the thing is lined with fire brick, and it won't take much of that rough treatment. So he'd shut it down, and Willie Hall, who is Gregory Hall's uncle, would come down with his 8-horse hitch and hook to it and pull it up the hill. That had gone on 2 or 3 years there, and this particular year he came down there and pulled it up. The next year the same thing happened. He came up to the sandy hill and the tractor started to jump, and Willie had bought a I think it was an F12 Farmall on steel wheels. The big debate was tractors or horses at that time. Well, Willie backs up to the rig with the old JI case tractor and the thrasher, and hooks it up to this steel wheel tractor, and the tractor dug 2 holes and sat down on the ground. And he went and got his 8-horse hitch again and came down there and pulled him back up the hill. This is in the late 30s, middle 30s, I would say. And so then the next year, the McClure thrasher comes up to the hill there, and it starts to jump again. And Willie has bought a tractor on rubber tires, an F12 Farmall tractor on rubber tires. And all the people that had gathered up to watch the scene were telling him, Willie, just go get the horses. You'll never be able to pull that thing up there. You know what he did last year? Willie just calmly backs up to the machine, hooks a chain on it with rubber-tired tractor, and pulled it right up the hill. And everybody went to town and bought rubber tires for their tractor. So that was a real eye-opener for what a set of rubber tires would do on the on a tractor at that time. So out at Brookshire's grocery store here in town, on the southwest corner, there is a picture of a steam tractor and thrasher in operation. And I am relatively sure that that's my granddad and my dad and a bunch of the Ravenna folks, Nunley folks, and the people around Mulberry and Ravenna operating that thrasher. It took several people to bring you set your thrasher up, and set the steam tractor up with a belt between the two, and the energy from the steam tractor goes down and turns the thrasher and separates your grain from the stalks and chaff and stuff. So that's the way that thing operates. And they have to, it takes a number of people, because this thing is sitting stationary, and a number of people have to bring grain to it, have to feed it to the thrashing machine, operate the steam tractor, sack the stuff. It was quite an operation. So when you hear about a thrasher dinner, well, somebody had to do a lot of cooking and have a lot of help to get all those men fed, a lot of times 3 meals a day. So it was quite an operation back at that time. My dad is Pete McClure, W.D. McClure, William David McClure, and his dad was Dave McClure. He originated in Illinois and came to Tennessee in around 1900, or 1905. Between 1900 and 1905, he moved from Tennessee to the Bethel community right south of White Rock. And they were there for a few years, and they decided to move up out to the Nunley community out here north of Bonham. That's where my dad grew up. My dad was actually born in Bethel, Texas, right south of White Rock, and then they moved to the Nunley community, and he was the oldest of 10 children. There were 5 boys and 5 girls. My granddad had 2 brothers, Elmer was my granddad's name, Ernest McClure out in the Nunley community, and Edgar McClure. And I don't know much about Edgar, but Uncle Ernest was quite a farmer out in the Nunley area for a number of years. And then E.G. Jr., Toots McClure, and was my dad's cousin, son of Ernest McClure. He married my mother's sister. So I am double related. My grandparents on my mother's side are the Carters, Mark Carter. And my granddad on my dad's side is Elmer McClure. They all farmed out there around the Nunley community. The Carters moved to the Nunley community from around Celeste and Leonard, out on the Blackland. And around 1932 or 33, somewhere along in there, and bought one of the government places in there, where the school and church was. That was on the corner of his property. And he had 80 acres, and he farmed a little bit and raised some cows. Is what his livelihood was. But my dad, in around 1935, 34, he would go to West Texas. He and Ernie and Bill McClure, a cousin, would go out West Texas to help with the cotton crop. They were working out there several years in the fall to help with the cotton crop because it would rain their crops out here, and they just didn't make it. Just had a lot of problems with their farming operation here in the Fannin County area. So they would go out there and help get in the cotton crop. And in 1937, Christmas of 1937, my mother and dad married and went to Lamesa, just north of Lamesa, in the Grandview community, and farmed out there with some other people. And they said that there was a place there that they lived on was next to an old cyanide plant. They pumped hot water into the ground and bring cyanide up. Cyanide, something, I don't remember what exactly the mineral, what all the minerals was, but it's a cyanide, if everybody knows, is pretty poison. And there was prairie dogs and a little owl that lives around there. They always got a kick out of them. So and I was born Christmas Eve, 1938. And we lived out there around the Grandview community about 3 or 4 years, and then moved east of Lamesa in the Key community, where my dad farmed until he decided to move back down here in 1966. And he bought an old place down on the old Ravenna Pike I don't remember what the number of that thing is, but it's ran right along the old DB&O railroad track, which had been taken up several years before that. And Mr. Phillips, Chicken Phillips, owned the place before. Had a big chicken house, and they raised fryers. And then for the last few years, he was in operation there on the old Ravenna Road. They raised laying hens. They'd have them up around 15, 16 weeks, and they would. Then the chicken place would come and get them. They got $1.50 a chicken a week to take care of these about 3,000 or 1,800 chickens, and the feed company supplied the chickens, the medicine, and the feed. And they got $1.50 a chicken a week. So it wasn't a great big money making thing, but my dad always enjoyed seeing things grow. So he raised a big garden and had cows and raised his own hay and took care of those kinds of things. So he always did just what he kind of liked to do, was seeing things grow with his garden and his chickens and his cattle. My dad farmed in the Key community as far back as I could remember, in about 1941, 42, 43, along in there. World War II was going on, and he was almost inducted into the service. And he had always said he intended to, if his number came up and he was going to have to go, he was going to try to get in the Navy. And that sounded good to me. So that's what I did when it came my time. But along in that time, he and the man he was working for were, of course, farming was an important, farmers were important back at that time, as well as servicemen. And he and the fellow he worked for were farming enough to keep 5 men out of service. So I don't remember just exactly how many acres, but I think it was about a section and a half. A section is 640 acres. And they raised cotton, and they raised maize, and several other things. Some corn, but not very much. And a big garden, of course. And they raised hogs and cows and those kinds of things. But I remember one of the very first things I remember. I started school in about 1945. I started school in 1945, and I remember my mother was terribly concerned about them testing something out in New Mexico that just might blow the whole world up. And that was a concern with some folks when they started that thing off, those atomic bombs off. And I have often wondered, she passed away in 1959, and I've often wondered where on earth she picked up that information, because it was supposed to be just about super secret.
Yeah.
And I have wondered, but I do remember her being very concerned that it just might blow the whole world up. Well, what is really strange about that is in 1957, I got out of high school and worked in the cotton gin one fall. And as I was a janitor's helper, which meant anything nobody else wanted to do, McClure, you go do it. So I would do it. And in this process, I would go around town and ask people, because ginning was a seasonal thing, do you have any work when this ginning season's over? And all of them, being old World War II codgers, would look down their nose at you and ask this one question: what's your draft status, boy? Well, I felt like I had it to do if I was going to get any employment out there. So I was, when it came my time after that ginning season, I decided I would go into the Navy, because my dad had kind of recommended that. And a friend of mine's older brother was in on leave from the Navy, and I asked him for some advice, and I said, what branch do you ask for? He said, ask for nuclear weapons. And I said, what is that? He said, I don't know. But he said, it's an open rate. It's not stacked up with a bunch of old codgers up there ahead of you. And if you pass the test, and you can stand a security clearance, and you can pass a bunch of tests, it's a good thing to get into because you pass the test, you get a stripe and get a pay raise, and that sounded good to me. Well, what neither one of us knew was I was an old farm boy. Of course, he knew that. We knew that. I was an old farm boy. Hadn't been in much trouble. So when I got to San Diego to boot camp, the question was, what rate do you want to get into? And I put down nuclear weapons just like as I knew what I was doing. I had no idea what it meant growing up in the cotton patch in West Texas. So I'm sure they found out right quick they could get a security clearance on me. And if they could get a security clearance on you and you were making good grades and I was making good grades, that's where you were going because they needed a bunch of people in there. So as get through boot camp and had our temporary assignment up in Washington State, and we ran torpedo motors for about 3 months while a school in Great Lakes, Illinois, Electricity and Electronic Prep School, opened up. The people had room for us there. And we ran torpedo motors on 52-foot and 72-foot aviation rescue boats. Each torpedo motor had to make 1 or 3 good successful runs, and then they were considered War Reserve, and they went from our little testing station there at Keyport, Washington, over to Bangor, Washington, into bunkers for wartime. So we spent our time there in temporary before the school opened up again for us in Great Lakes, Illinois. We go up there and we get AC theory, DC theory, motors and generators, and electronics. And that's a preparatory thing for the Special Weapons School in Great Lakes, in Sandy Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So here my mother had been terribly concerned about the atomic bomb, and that's the field I wind up in the Navy. So then we get to Sandy Base, Albuquerque, and the first day in school is security that morning. The afternoon is museum. We go in that morning, security. And they told us 10,000 times to tell nobody anything, nothing. Said the other person's going to have a security clearance in communications. He won't tell you a thing. You don't tell him anything. That was the long and the short of it. And you signed a bunch of papers that you wouldn't say anything, so they could get you later on if you did say something. So then that afternoon is a museum, and I don't know what anybody else was thinking, but I never expected what we walked in on. The biggest Quonset hut that I had ever seen, and these 2 Navy chiefs are standing there patting these 2 big old bombs. One's about 2 feet in diameter, and the other one was about 4.5 feet in diameter. There's a fat man and a little boy. And the chief said, come on in, sailors. He said, this is the one we dropped on Hiroshima, and that's the one we dropped on Nagasaki. You're going to learn all about them. And the hair still stands up on the back of my neck when I think about that, because I just about went into shock, but I found out what nuclear weapons was all about. But it was an interesting thing because it was a real challenge, and it puts your electrical training that you had just gone through in Great Lakes to the test. They were sure that you knew what you were doing before they let you out of that school and sent you to a ship or some duty station. And my assignment was to the USS Forrestal, CVA 59, the first supercarrier. And that was my mobile home for 3 years and 2 months. And after about a year of being on there, a friend of mine that we'd been with most of that time were assigned to be tech monitors. That meant you went with the bomb up to hang it on the plane. You told the pilot what it weighed was a very important thing, and you showed him what settings you put in them, or if there was any settings, or what you were going to do. This was peacetime, but when you got out into international waters, out of the continental limits, we kept 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sometimes hanging on planes with a security wrap around them, and there was a Marine standing there where nobody was to tamper those things except us. We had a security clearance tag attached to us when you walked up to that thing, and you didn't just run up to that bomb. You went up and you talked to that Marine, and you made sure that he understood that you had and he saw your security clearance. and that you had access to that area. And the pilot would come up with his little book, and you would have your little book, and you would say, this is aircraft number so-and-so, and we would confirm that, and your Lieutenant so-and-so, or Ensign so-and-so, or Lieutenant Commander so-and-so, and you would show him what settings were in it. As you move toward the Mediterranean, where our ship was assigned was in the Mediterranean twice for 8-9 months. As you went across the Atlantic, the target would change as you got closer to Europe. And then after you got into the Mediterranean, from time to time, the target would change. But I never knew what the target was, but it would say B1 or X9 or Q35 or something. And that pilot may have not known, or he may have known where that was, but I don't know. He may have not known until he was going to fly. But fortunately, we never had to fly one of them. But we did fly. We had some dummy bombs that didn't have any nuclear in them, but had high explosive in them. When we would go down and train off Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, there's a gunnery range down there that planes would come in and shoot at targets. And you really don't have to be very close with an atomic bomb, but you want to be in the county, I would say. So they would fly these over there without nuclear in them and drop them and see how close they could get to the target, and they would go boom, just the high explosive. Well, this one Lieutenant Busby, I was up there with one, and there was no settings to them whatsoever. You just hooked a lanyard onto the bomb rack. And this is a training thing, and you told him what it weighed. And I do not remember what this old bomb weighed, but it was a Mark 91, very, very heavy. It was made to penetrate sub-pens in Germany. It penetrated about 50, 60 feet of reinforced concrete, they said. I don't know, I never did see it do it, but it would penetrate a bunch, and it was terribly, terribly heavy for its size, very deceptive. And so you check the bomb rack, and in the bomb rack, the aviation ordnance people put a big shotgun shell in that bomb rack that would force the bomb away from the plane, because if you just flying along, I never did fly, but I saw pictures of it. If you're flying along and you just release the bomb, a lot of times the bomb will follow along in what they call the slipstream and stay right with you. And I don't think you want an atomic bomb staying right with you, timing out and going boom. So this shotgun shell, and it's not really a shotgun shell, but it looks like bigger than a 10 gauge. I don't know. It's about 2 inches, inch and a half diameter, that forces the bomb away from the plane when he turns it loose. When that pilot releases the bomb rack, it pushes that bomb away from the plane. So I checked that, and I hooked the lanyard on to the bomb rack that's going to start the timing mechanism when he drops it. And Lieutenant Busby, when I said what the bomb weighed, I saw him roll his eyes. That bomb can't weigh that. I could see him just thinking that. So I told him again, and one of our warrant officers is standing right there by us. He doesn't take a catapult shot. He just put right off the bow to take off. When they're launching planes on the ship like that, the Forrestal, you turn into the wind, and that thing will go about 40 miles an hour. So if you've got a 20 mile an hour wind and 40 miles an hour, you can have 60 miles an hour of wind speed right there. And so he doesn't take much. It doesn't take much for this big old AD-6, a great big radial engine, to get that plane going. But he failed to compensate for the weight of that bomb. And we almost plowed him under. He's got his wheels in the water just a little bit. He got up. About 2 hours later, I'm down in our spaces, securing things and doing what we always did, taking care of the atomic bomb. That's all we did. And I got a call. One of the officers came out there and said, McClure, we need to talk to somebody on the phone, won't you? Lieutenant Busby. He said, you know what this is all about? I said, I might. So I got on the phone, and Lieutenant Busby's on the other end of the line. He says, McClure, can you come up to Ready Room 6? I need to talk to you. I said, we'll be there in a little bit. And so I started trying to get it together, and I had to go up and check out with the Marine. There was a Marine on our spaces that nobody got in there except the captain, the executive officer, and the gunnery officer, and W Division, which was the ones that took care of the weapons. special weapons. So as I started up the ladder to go past the Marine and check out security-wise, the division officer, who was a lieutenant commander, which would be a major in other services, called and said they want to talk to me. And I guess it's the only time I ever talked to Lieutenant Commander Bartlett on the phone. And he asked me, he said, did you get a call to go to Ready Room 6? I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, you know what this is all about? And I said, I told him I thought I did. And I told him that I thought we almost plowed Lieutenant Busby under because he failed to realize the real weight of that bomb, what it's going to do to that plane. He said, you wait, you go up and you check out that Marine and you wait for me. I said, yes, sir. So I just barely got past the Marine and checked out security-wise out of our spaces. And here comes Lieutenant Commander Bartlett in a long run. And the aircraft carrier has had two of the longest escalators in the world to carry air crew from mess decks where you ate lunch to the flight deck. And we got on the escalator and we went up to Ready Room 6. Well, that's officers' country. And we peons, I was an E5, which is 5 jumps from the bottom, but still relatively low compared to the officers. You never did go up in the officers' country unless you were called up there. So we walk up to Ready Room 6, and here's about 15, 18 pilots sitting there. They brief them and debrief them. What did you see? What did you do? What happened when you dropped the bomb? And all these kinds of things, I suppose. And as I walked up to the door, this arm and this hand came out and got me by the arm and ushered me up to the front of the meeting there. And Lieutenant Busby, and he didn't say a thing to me right straight. He just said he still had me by the arm, standing in front of all the pilots, and he said, "Guys, this guy's name's McClure, and if he tells you that bomb weighs 90,000 pounds, by God, you better believe it." So that was the end of that. But after the Navy pilots were always kind of smart alecky around and rather cocky, and I guess they had a right to be, I don't know. But after that, when he saw me any place on the ship, it was a nice greeting and a handshake and how are you today and all these kinds of things. So it was a real eye-opener what being honest and telling the guy just exactly how it is can kind of get to a person like that. In the fall of 1961, I had about 6 months left doing the Navy, get out of the Navy in February of '62. Russia ups and builds the Berlin Wall. And they came to me and said, you have 3 extra months, which would put me out in May of '62 instead of February of '62. And of course that really endeared me to the whole thing because I was looking forward to getting out. Well, my wife and I had married, who's Ruth McDowell, who's raised by the Henleys out in the Ravenna community. And we were looking forward to getting out and a friend of mine that I had been on the ship the whole time with, named Charles Dubray from down around Fredericksburg. He and I were going to come through New Orleans and hoop-de-doo at the Mardi Gras. Well, that didn't work out since February went into May before we were mustered out of the Navy. But something really real funny about the Berlin Wall, my 2 daughters, Mira Austin and Mary McDonald, had heard these stories 10,000 times, I'm sure, but I still repeat it to them. They had heard the story about the Berlin Wall. Well, I guess it was on my 65th birthday, they came up with pieces of the Berlin Wall for my birthday in little enclosures, little things certifying that it was. I'm not really sure it's a piece of New York sidewalk or a piece of the Berlin Wall, but it's real enough for me in the statement that says it is a piece of the Berlin Wall that they always find something funny to do with around my birthday since it's on Christmas Eve. We just have a grand old time. After the Navy days, jobs here in the Fannin County area the main job was General Cable. And it was a little while before I got on down at General Cable, but I was a helper, and I wanted to get into electrical maintenance. And I was assured as we went in there that with my background and all that I would be ushered right in there. Well, it doesn't happen that way. Maintenance at General Cable was a kind of a family clique thing. You'd have to marry somebody's daughter or something, and I was already married, so that was kind of out of the question. And they wanted to keep you occupied on what they wanted you occupied on, not necessarily what you were interested in. But electrical stuff was just kind of in me. And as the end of '62 came along, the power plant, Texas Power and Light over at Savoy, called me and wanted to know that I wanted to go work over there as an electrician, as well as an electrician's helper. But I went over there, and about 3 months later, they made me a junior electrician, and about 6 months after that, they made me a senior electrician. And I was the lead electrician over there for about 11 years, and they moved me to supervision, and I supervised mechanics for 10, and then I was head of the electrical department for 10 before I retired in 1992. But my wife is Ruth McClure, Ruth McDowell McClure, part of the McDowell family out around Ed Hubie, and the Price family and Henley family out around Ravenna and Mulberry. At Henley and Orpha Henley were the couple that raised my wife. They're her grandparents. You couldn't ask for a better relation between people than what my wife and her grandparents had. But we married in 1960, which puts us almost to the 50-year mark here in just a short time. But in 1966, our oldest daughter was born. 1966, Mira McClure, her Austin now. Married to David Austin, the barber here in town. She's one of the customer service managers at Walmart. And we always kid her and tell her she was out of high school one day, and my wife put the question to her, "Are you going to go to school or do something else?" She said, "I do not want to go any more school. I've had all that I want." And so my wife encouraged her to start looking for a job. Well, the biggest thing for girls at that time was Walmart. And so she graduated from school on Tuesday and went to work for Walmart on Thursday, and has been there ever since. That was a big step for her. And our younger daughter, Mary McDonald, is a school teacher in Leonard, had been teaching up to this year, and this year she became a diagnostics, in the diagnostics field for kids who have reading disabilities or dyslexia or things like that. She tests IQs and all the deficiencies to see what they can do about them, and then she works them into other schedules. But she's been out down there 11 years now, and she has 2 children, Emily McDonald and David McDonald. David McDonald has just gone into the Army and is entering boot camp Army boot camp either yesterday or tomorrow. So we're not really sure. We're not getting a whole lot of information from him on this at this point. Mira's son, James Brown, is a Walmart employee also. He does night stocking in the grocery department, and he's trained really well in produce as well. So has been an apprentice electrician for about 10 years, I guess now, 7 or 8 years anyway. No, 7 or 8 years. That would be the size of it, because he's 21 years old, and I think he was an apprentice electrician at 14. He helps me some on the side when he's not doing this Walmart thing. But electrically speaking, I do Habitat for Humanity, and I do the houses on the electrical end of it, and a number of people here in town are electrical apprentices because of our work together on the thing. The city and districts around require everybody that's doing on electrical end of it to have a license, and there are one of our leading citizens here in Bonham, Sally Simpson, is is an apprentice electrician. But there's a number of others who are, and I try to keep them up to speed on what the latest code things are and teach them. The thing I tell them is they come to work with me on the thing. I tell them the only dumb question is one you don't ask. If you want to know something about electrically speaking, I may not know the answer, but I will get you an answer shortly. So it's something that's just in me. I enjoy electricity. A lot of people are afraid of it, and I guess that's good for me. But I tell them it's like a big rattlesnake. I'm not afraid of it, but I have a healthy respect for it. It will get you. So it's been a real interesting field for me in a long time. There's a guy asking me the other day about my background. I said, well, I've been in the electrical field for 50 years, so you can figure about what, to say I've seen it all is not exactly true, but I've seen a whole lot of it. So I'm not as old as Thomas Edison, but I have gleaned a lot from his insight on the whole thing. Our daughter, Mary McDonald, has prepared some more for her teaching field. And she has a master's degree in reading and a master's degree in diagnostics. And that's what she's doing over in Leonard School System now, is diagnostics to help kids out that are having reading problems or other problems school-wise. When she was a senior over at Commerce, Texas A&M Commerce, her senior year, she had an elective that they were encouraging her to take, and the subject was not that important, except it became important. The subject was the making of the atomic bomb, and it was a subject that was designed to make them do a world of research, and where it had a bunch of people involved, and they would be assigned 3 or 4 people. Boers was the name of one of the nuclear scientists that was in her assignment, and there would be 3 or 4 of them together, work as a team to come up with all the data that they could on these guys and give report and written reports and oral reports. And James Price was one of the ones who was on the Indianapolis that carried the nuclear material from the U.S. to Tinian to be delivered over to Japan. And we all remember what that was all about, the bombing of Japan. They didn't want to fly, at that time they didn't want to fly an atomic bomb with the nuclear material in it. If it happened to crash out there, they didn't want the area contaminated with nuclear material, which was probably wise, because it was such a new field there. The Indianapolis carried the nuclear material, and the plane, J.D. Tippett was the pilot, and Mr. Sweeney kept, I forget now what his rank was, but Sweeney was the pilot of the second plane that delivered the second bomb to Japan. They flew the bomb less nuclear material to Tinian. The crew that was going to deliver the bomb flew the plane and the bomb with no nuclear material in it. The Indianapolis was a cruiser that was directed to go radio silence from the U.S. to Tinian and deliver the nuclear material that went in it. So they delivered that and left there and was doing a zigzag course out across there, and just so happened here comes the Japanese submarine and sinks them. And Mr. Price was one of the few out of about something like 800. There was like 180 or 183. But anyway, wasn't many that survived 5 or 6 days in the water. Finally, some plane flew over them and saw them. They had no idea that they were out there and that they'd been sunk. There would be a radio silence, and that was all there was to it. And they did what they were told to do. But they were sunk, and Mr. Price down here in Northtown, who passed away just a few years ago, was one of the survivors. Well, when my youngest daughter, Mary McDonald, was in Commerce, Texas A&M Commerce, the senior year, She was encouraged to take this. It's a research course, and the subject was a great big book about 2 inches thick, Making the Atomic Bomb, which she bought her a copy and me a copy, and I just read the whole thing just as fast as I could. And when she went up to ask what is the deal here on this course, she was told that they wanted her to take it, and that gave her a brief history on it. And she was interested because I had been in this thing, and she went up to the Professor Dixon and said, back in the late 50s, early 60s, my dad was in this program. And his first question was, is he still alive? She assured him that I was. And he asked if I would come down there and talk to him, what might I say, and would I write him a summary, an outline of what I might say if I came down there. Well, it tickled me that somebody was interested in such a thing, and so I wrote him a little outline, and Mary took it to him, and his immediate response was, when could he come down there and do this? She said, well, I'll give you the phone number, and you call him this evening, and you find out. So I was quick to respond, and I started off like our Navy teachers had done. I started off with 10 questions. Like, have you done your homework? Well, these people had been in this course about a week and a half or so. I expected that they would have weeded through the first 2 or 3 chapters, but nobody answered any of my questions. And I really got a kick out of that. I told them that they all flunked and that they were all out of school right there. So we all had a big laugh about that, but we had a really good time going through the program with them, and they had a number of questions. And the professor was going to. I went back to school one more year and did the thing, and he never had called me again. I don't know whether he retired or moved or just what, or changed the subject or just exactly what. But it was it opened his eyes a whole lot too about how all those things were done. Mary went down and interviewed. In this process, she went down and interviewed Mr. Price at telephone about his experience on the Indianapolis and his experience in the water and his experience after that and how he managed to survive. And there was also a lady here in town, Joanne Shaw, and her last name, Howell, Joanne Howell, who was Joe Shaw's daughter that had the hardware store here in Bonham for several years. She is a nuclear scientist at Los Alamos. Mary interviewed her as well and made about an A double plus or triple plus on her reports and summaries and all that she gleaned from those people. And one of the little books that she got from Joanne Shaw Howell, was Whatever Happened to Uncle Henry. And it was it was a thing to kind of help a kid understand what was going on out there around Los Alamos at the time they were developing that bomb. It said Uncle Henry left here, wherever this was, and went to New Mexico. His address is Santa Fe, but he's not in Santa Fe. And it never does really get to say where he is, but everybody's address it was like the fleet post office for your ship. When I was on the ship, my fleet post office was Norfolk, Virginia. But you were not in Norfolk that often. But whatever happened to Uncle Henry, and it went into all these little details. Doesn't really give you very much information, but then Aunt Sally goes out to visit Uncle Henry, and her address is Santa Fe, but she's not in Santa Fe. She's there out there at this Manhattan project in Los Alamos. And we really uncovered a lot of interesting subject matter on that project. And then I still wonder how my mother found out anything about, which was this matter that was supposed to have been so super secret in 1945 that apples blow up the whole world. That it mystifies me. And she passed away in 1959, and I would love to have known. And I have never found out anybody that was concerned or knew anything about it except her. When John Kennedy was president, there we had a big show and tell. There was dignitaries from, I guess, almost every country in the world on the Forrestal, the Saratoga, Independence. I don't remember just exactly how many carriers were out there, but we were way out in the Atlantic, and they came by strafing with machine guns and dropping small bombs and pop-up flares for illuminating battlefields and these kinds of things. And John Connally was the dignitary. He was Secretary of the Navy, and he was the bigwig on the Forrestal to come out to show and tell. And of course, he had an entourage of people from other countries, Greece and Spain and all those places. And we had a mishap in our division, and had little cars that moved our bombs around. And one of the young fellows got a foot caught between these rails as this upper and lower car moves along the thing, and had cut his big toe off. And we were trying to get a different bomb handling apparatus, and John Connally came down, and being from Texas, I was assigned to be in the group to explain to Big John what our problem was and what we'd like to see. We'd heard about bomb handling equipment on other ships, and we thought it'd be a big improvement. It never did happen while I was on there, but it happened later after I got off. There was one later on that got a heel damaged in the same kind of a mishap. But there were just all different air groups, AD-6s, A-4Ds, A-3Ds came by dropping small bombs between the carriers, and it was just quite a show, showing off President Kennedy to show off what his country had developed. But of course, it wasn't dropping any atomic bombs and things like that. But one of the real illuminating things was kind of getting toward dark that evening, and here comes a fighter plane. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, it was shooting flares to illuminate a battlefield. It's our RDO photography. We had a photo recon bunch on there. One of these would come by popping these flares up. It did just light up the whole country for miles and miles and miles. You'd think the sun had come up again, but it was a real interesting time. It was the only time I was ever on there that for about 3 days, everybody was in dress blues. you had to be in your dress uniform with all your ribbons and all those kinds of things so that everybody was spick and span. There wasn't anybody in dungarees anywhere on the ship that I knew anything about. But it was a real interesting time. John Connally and I forget who. There was a couple of senators on there with them, and then with Mr. Kennedy there was several of the senators and more people from industry, and the different countries were on the I guess it was the Ranger that he was on. But there was 4 carriers running along side by side, and then there was a bunch of destroyers and cruisers and all those things that run along with you. One time we were out in the Atlantic, and all of us doing, this was peacetime, and it was all training. You have to do this, and one division do this, and another division do that. And everybody's concentrating on them and helping them in any way they could. But we were in one of these operations, and all of a sudden they recovered all the aircraft and turned. I was just telling Miss White that I don't know how that ship ever got anywhere, because when I was on it, my head always said that ship is going north. So I would have either been the best navigator or the worst navigator to come down the pike, because it was always headed north. I don't know how we got anywhere, but we could be going in circles, and my head said we're going north. But everything, they recovered all the planes just as quickly as we could. You could see things were happening. They weren't saying anything about what was going on, but we started a straight shot. We'd been going circles and this way and that way, but we started one direction. Of course, it was north to me, but it didn't make any difference. And we secured all the planes, and then the captain came on the 1MC, the speaker, system on the ship that addresses the whole ship, and he says we are headed for a certain latitude, longitude. There's a sub on the floor out there on the ground that has just surfaced, that has been stuck on the bottom for a certain period of time, and we're going to have a plane ready to fly them to, I suppose, Washington. I do not remember where it said, but I'm sure it was flying him to Washington. But about 4 hours later, we began to see a sub out there, and there was a destroyer along with it too, I believe. And as we got within sight of it, one of our helicopters took off and flew over to the sub and picked up two. I don't know who was the captain, the executive officer, but some of the upper echelon that was on that sub. We picked them up and brought them to the ship. They went right from that helicopter onto a jet, and shoo, they were gone. So they were doing some heavy investigating what had gone wrong and what had you done to solve the problem and get yourself back up. They had done it themselves. So whatever it was we never did hear a report or anything else, but it was a amusing incident that as we got out of boot camp, there was 3 of us that were assigned to nuclear weapons school, and we had our stripes. We were seaman apprentices, and we had a bomb with electrons in orbit. It was a nuclear weaponsman. So you put that on your sleeve, and as we got to Washington State to do this, run the torpedo motors as part of this, what we were actually sent up there to do was to mess cook and clean house for 3 months, waiting for school, the ENEP school in Great Lakes, Illinois. Well, as I prepared to go to Keyport, Washington, from La Mesa out of boot camp, after boot leave, there was a question where Keyport, Washington was, and the station master in La Mesa looked at his schedule, and he said, I don't know where Keyport, Washington is, and my schedule here doesn't say anything about Keyport, Washington. And so I said, well, if you had orders to go there, what would you do? He said, I would buy my ticket to Seattle and I would leave early. So that's what I did. I left about 2 days, cut my leave about 2 days short, and took off to Keyport, Washington, Seattle. I hopefully would get to Keyport with a couple of days, with a day or so to spare. So as on a bus, headed for Seattle. And as we arrived in Denver, I had forgotten my orders at home. And my dad called and said, we are sending your orders to Keyport, Washington. And I thought, well, when I get there, they'll shoot me because I don't have my orders. I'm going to get there before they do. So I was concerned about that the whole way. Well, I get to Seattle. The station master there says, I don't know where Keyport, Washington is. And I said, well, if you had orders to go there, what would you do? He said, I'd get on that ferry and go to Bremerton. So I get on the ferry and go to Bremerton. And I came off the gangway of the ferry. There was a Navy carryall down there, a Suburban nowadays, sitting down at the foot of the gangplank, and a first-class torpedoman there. And I asked him, I said, sir, what, could you tell me where Keyport, Washington is? He said, throw your stuff in, I'll take you right by there. This was Sunday afternoon, and the officer of the day was an old warrant officer. And so I'm early, about 2 days early. I came in there, and I found out a long time ago was the best thing to do is when you goof like this is just to come right up front and tell the man what you've done. So as I came in, he greeted me and asked me who I was and what my business was, and I told him I was assigned to Keyport, Washington, Naval Torpedo Station, Keyport, Washington, but I forgot my orders at home. His first comment was, you found this place, you belong here. So that started me off on the right foot. He said, you got here early. He said, I have people out on emergency leave, sick leave, all kinds of things. I'm going to put you on a boat crew since you got here early. And we had the grandest time running torpedo motors to make 3 good runs, and they were put in for War Reserve. But the other 2 guys that came in later on, I told the warrant officer that what the other 2 guys' names were. He said, I know we have 3 people coming, but I don't even know what the names is. So I told him what their names were, and that one was from Missouri and the other was from Houston, and that they came in and they mess cooked and cleaned house for 3 months. And I was out on a boat crew and had the grandest time of my life. Even spent 2 weeks on a big tugboat up there, pushing things around, pulling things around, pushing ships out, and all these kinds of things. It was a grand time. But you never would have made any rank there, but it was a fun place to be for a short time. It's in the back out there in the Straits of Juan de Fuca, out northwest of Seattle. It was a grand time. Now, here in Fannin County, the wife and I came back here in 1962 when I got out of the Navy, and she had always been a member of the Christian church in Ravenna, and there was a bunch of grand old people there, and they inducted me as one of the elders pretty quick, and we've been associated with that church ever since. Our daughters and grandchildren are members of the First United Methodist Church here in Bonham. I make mission trips with them. We've made mission trips to Neon Fleming, Kentucky, and the Fort Thompson area in South Dakota. We were in South Dakota, and you get these volunteer groups coming in to do wiring and plumbing and whatever needs to be done. And this one group had pulled wire where wire didn't need it to be, and had not pulled wire in where it needed to be. And that was my assignment to start off with, was to straighten that up. And as I went into the attic, I noticed that the building was a metal building, and it was studded up with 2x6s, and had 6 inches of fiberglass insulation in it. And on the outside, between the metal building and the studs, was 2 inches of styrofoam, taped really well. It was really sealed really well. I was amazed at that. Some of it was 1 inch thick, and it was done twice, so it came up with a 2 inch. You could tell they were trying to get a uniform 2 inches thick of styrofoam on there. And I asked our fearless leader, what does the temperature hit up here? He said, well, in the winter, it will be, we'll have a 70 below zero chill factor, and the wind will be blowing 30, 40 miles an hour. I said, you can just imagine how cold it is. And I assured him right then that he might see me up there again in the summer, but I would not be up there in the wintertime. 70 below zero.
Oh, terrible.
20 or 30 below zero, and have a chill factor of 40 or 50 below. So we've had an interesting experience. We also went to Mobile, Alabama. I do went on a Habitat for Humanity project down there. I followed Jimmy Carter, and his bunch had been down there and built framed up 15 houses in a week, 4 or 5 days. I forget just exactly the period, but we came in to start finishing them out, putting siding on them, and I think most of the sheetrock was in place, but some of the sheetrock had to be put up. But our assignment was putting up siding on them, hardy plank siding, which hardy plank generously donates for almost all the Habitat houses. And the Habitat chapter here, we have built 3 houses, and we have a 4th one just about to begin in Leonard. And that family has been selected, and we're looking forward to getting that one done. We have built one in Honey Grove, was the last one we built, and one here in Bonham, and one out in the Nunley community. Then we'll be looking around for other family selections. To summarize the whole thing, I've enjoyed talking to you today about the McClure family, the Carter family, the Nunley community, the Key community out in West Texas, military happenings that I've been fortunate enough to live through and survive, and it's just been a real thrill. I hope somebody gets some real insight